Before we get okay, before we get into like talking about death and that fascination and talking about your film, it would be great to give like a little background on you. Those are your
Okay.
clothes behind you, obviously.
Yeah. These didn't make it in the video, but they're part of the bigger project. So I'm Erik Bergrin, and I make these large fiber sculptures that are costume based most of the time. But I started in the costume world, and slowly they kind of came off the body. And like this guy behind me was part of a project that they came off the body. And my latest project, which is the Eight Dissolutions, was part of the Fashion Clash, which is how you know about it. I put all the
Not how I know about it. I know about it from Miguel Villalobos.
uh, yeah, shout out to Miguel. I love Miguel. Yeah, and so the Eight Dissolutions, they came back on the body, and that's my latest project.
Well, I think what's interesting, one point that's interesting about the film is the topic, because we all know we're going to die, but most people don't really want to get into the topic, right?
Right.
I mean, and this eight dissolutions, death, and it's very emotional and very wow, it's powerful. So tell me, how did you get into let me turn this off. How did you get into digging deep into the topic, and what's your spiritual, it's very spiritual.
Mhm.
So what's the connection with Buddhism? Wherever.
So the whole Eight Dissolutions project was something I wanted to investigate because of a prior project that I did, which, this is one of them. It was called Shadow Work, and I'll just take you through that really quick, because you need to in order to understand. I feel like all of my work is like a continuation from the previous thing, and I'll learn something from the previous project that'll be like, oh, I need to investigate that. And then I'll do another project solely focusing on that. And that'll bring me to the next one. So the Eight Dissolutions was because I did this. I have my book here. I did this project that I showed in 2018 called Shadow Work. And I made these 9 pieces that was a kind of a ritualistic telling of how I kind of create my own mental hell, really, through reinforcing negative thoughts over and over.
Did you
So,
say mental hell or mental
yeah,
health?
mental hell. I mean,
Okay.
kind of one and the same, but mental hell. But I use hell in like a psychological way, not in a Christian way. It's just I go on these long meditation retreats. By long, I mean like 10 days, really. And you're meditating for like, 10 to 12 hours a day. And there's no talking, and they're pretty intense. So by the time I come out of there, your body's like wrecked from sitting so long, but you also get in touch with these like things that you didn't even realize were buried in your subconscious. So at the end of I went a couple of retreats, I sort of had this realization, and I really wanted to dig deeper into it. And so I made this project in order to spend a couple of years kind of digging into this. So there were 9 pieces, and I'll show you through them really quick. That was one. And so this is like the candles are lit.
Chakras.
So these pieces are all this size. They're about 7 feet tall. They're big. And then the next one is this. So I finished like 5 of them, and then we shot them for this magazine, King Kong. And these were photos from the photo shoot.
Is
So
that like in a casket or what?
yeah, yeah. And then this is all woven, but you can
Uh,
see the scale, and that is sage. So, and that's kind of the dusting of the sage before the ceremony. And then this one is all coiled, which is like 1-inch strips of fabric that are wrapped in thread and then sewn into these 3D shapes. You can kind of see that there. So this is where the bowl is, and there's a Tibetan singing bowl in there, and then it's ready. The ceremony is ready to begin.
Have you spent much time like in the East?
Yeah. Where I first learned the 8 dissolutions was I did a retreat.
I have to have my sage now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we should have dusted the computer before we even started.
Here you go. Like, please come back to us. Okay.
Yeah, where I learned the 8 dissolutions was in a monastery I did a retreat at in Nepal. And so they taught us this it was a lot of visualizations, because Tibetans love their visualizations. And I first learned it there, and I was like, whoa, this is so juicy, because it was, it's visualization, and I just was getting so much from it, which is what made me want to do this project, because I was like, I really want to learn this. And Buddhists, they love to meditate on death. It's like a really big thing, because we're all going to die, and that is it's like the best way to become in your body, to become as present as you can, is to know that the end is near and you don't know when it is going to happen. So if you constantly think about that, you'll really treasure every moment. And I feel like it sounds dark, but it's kind of the opposite, where it's meant to really bring you back into cherishing every second. And so this was the next one and this was the key. This was what brought me to the 8 dissolutions. So the body is split open, and then all of this stuff is inside, kind of ready to come out. So this is all woven. I built this, like, it was so huge. I had to build a giant loom to weave this, because I didn't want any seams in it. And it was like, I think it was like 100 inches. It was a giant frame loom, and I was weaving with jute rope, which tore my fingers apart. But then this is the other one. This is called the crematorium. So it's hard to see, and these are all on my website, but this is like a giant crematorium, basically. And so all of that stuff from the last piece is split open, and it's exposed until you're burning in your own junk.
So do you like Alejandro Jodorowsky by any
chance? Of course. Yeah.
Feels right up his alley.
Yeah, no, he's amazing. I still follow him on Instagram, and his posts are just so brilliant. He makes me giddy to see him and his videos in Paris, like walking around, kind of being silly.
With his wife, yes.
Yeah.
I think I can say that we're friends. I'm closer to his wife than to Pascal than Alejandro. I mean, I see her on occasion for a tea or something, but I've been at their place. It's great because you see big posters of Holy Mountain and El Topo. But I was listening and looking at what you're doing. I was like, he has to be into Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's like such a great influence, and like, I don't know, just all the stuff that happened with Dune as well. I mean, that was just in that whole documentary. And I really want to get my hands, or at least see that book, the Dune book, that there's only like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 copies in the world.
Yeah. Well, there's the cassettes, of the film, the making of the film that never happened. I have it right here.
You do?
Well, not the book. I have all the films.
Oh my God.
Because it was a gift from Alejandro.
Oh, that's amazing.
No, it's really nice. I did, like, not to go off topic, but a couple years ago, or maybe 5 years ago, at my festival, and it was at Centre Pompidou, I did a tribute to Alejandro. And I had him, his two of his sons, his youngest and his oldest, his wife, of course, because she's like the art director and does the costumes, and his producer. It was great.
That is great. That is amazing.
No, he's a pretty amazing person.
Yeah, and actually spiritual, that's just, I feel like, well, there's no BS there, He's not just making really cool visual movies, like he embodies that. And it's so genuine, and it comes across, and like it definitely comes across in the films, but when you sort of investigate him, it's totally there, And I like that childlike quality, because I feel like if you're actually doing the work, you better be a really great person. Otherwise, what's the point? You're not doing the work, If it's not making you a better person, you're doing something wrong. So, and I feel like he really kind of has that. It's amazing. But anyway, this was the next part of it.
Is that like nails, or what is
It
that?
it's all woven. So almost all these, this is all jute rope, and then this is all roving, and it's all made with reed. Like this part down the middle is all reed that I dye, and that is after you're burning in it, it completely solidifies you. And then the last three pieces, which this piece behind me is included, they were devoted to, that's this one, which is all dyed reed, that's all woven. And then the middle are rainbow threads. And the last three pieces were devoted to the rainbow body, which is this like amazing Buddhist phenomenon where at the time of death, if you become enlightened, your body explodes sort of into a rainbow light. And there's all of these accounts of these monks, this happening, and just rainbows in the sky and Choding Trungpa, and there's a lot of accounts of this and like videotaped. And when I stayed in the monastery, so let me go through this before I get to that. This is the next one, where, so in my story, the rainbow threads, and there's a little guy in there, become black. And then the last piece, they were less black. And then this is the last piece where they become even, it's just black. So it's kind of like the whole rainbow body is being taken away. So when I showed them, I had them in a circle in dirt. I'm trying to find a photo of the.
Where did you show this?
At Marlboro Gallery on 25th Street in New York. And that final show is in 2018. The whole thing was this life cycle of like reinforcing negative thoughts over and over until you die and you become born again, and then do it the same. And it's this life cycle after life cycle of doing this to yourself. I'm going to leave you with a little encouragement that the way I know it's, I'll leave you with this. The way to get out of that is what I realized was the key was this. So I really wanted to model this. I traveled to Peru and I went to this museum in the city called Arequipa. And there's this museum dedicated to Juanita, the mummy. And it's basically this like little girl. It's so amazing. It's just like you watch a film about her and then you go through it and everything is really dark. And there's all these objects she was buried with. But it's basically this little girl who was chosen at a very young age to be sacrificed to the gods, to the Andean gods, Pachamama. And they took her into the mountains and they did this whole ritual with her. And it was like, days long. And then they hit her on the head with a rock and they sacrificed her. But she knew from a very young age she was going to be sacrificed at a certain age. So at the end of the museum, like you go see all the objects, they take you in this black room. It's like bone chilling. It's amazing. And then there's this like glass box, and it's so dark. Your eyes like take a minute to become focused. And as soon as you realize what you're looking at, it's like her in an ice box, and it's very small. But I was so like struck by this image. It's a person, it's striking, but there was like more to it than that. And I was keeping a journal, and I realized that the reason why I was so like struck by it is because it was the idea of knowing from a very young age she was going to die. And it was only like she was sacrificed when she was like 10 or 10 to 12. So it's like 10 years. You live your life knowing that you only have 10 years on this earth, and you can either be completely liberated by that or be totally trapped in fear. And in the grand scheme of the universe, our 100 years and her 10 years, they're like nothing. They're like no difference. So that was my way to get out of this reinforcing of negative thoughts, was to focus on my own death and realize that I ain't got a lot of time. So you better be making it worth it. Which brought me to the 8 dissolutions, which is completely focused on the death process. And that's why I started doing that in the first place. COVID happened. I was like, I was in my studio and I just spent the whole year working on the 8 dissolutions.
How's your health, by the way?
I got COVID twice, but once was kind of bad, but not hospital bad. But second time wasn't so bad. I'm good now. Did you get it?
I got, after 3 years of not getting it, I did get it, but it was just exhausting. It wasn't, like a sore throat, and was exhausted for 3 days. Aside from that, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, that's good.
But I mean, it's interesting because on the topic of death and the film, it's like some cultures celebrate death, like in Mexico, you party with the dead, Day of the Dead.
Right.
And others, cultures like ours, I suppose, nobody wants to talk about it, really.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is so strong about the film, because you focus on a topic that it's inevitable. We're all going to die. Some die young, some die old, but yeah, like you said, you're here for a short period of time in the big picture.
Right.
And I see the point of like, okay, if you go into this Vanta black hole, into the, like, the incinerator, are you going to come out a rainbow or a diamond?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great, that should be my catchphrase.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really taboo to talk about it, and it hurts people because a lot of people have had really close people that, and I so don't mean to do that. And I didn't make this project as I mean, the point wasn't to like hold a mirror up to people and be like, you're gonna die, because not everyone's ready to face that, but I wanted to. And the this project took me a year. Shadow work took me like 4+ years to do. So during that time, I'm making these things every day. It takes forever. I'm not solely focusing on that. It completely develops into all of this other stuff. And so the 8 dissolutions became this whole thing about materiality and investigation of materials, because I started growing all these weird materials. Because when there's a visualization you can do that takes you through the 8 stages. So the 8 dissolutions it's a Buddhist death process where it goes in 8 stages, and each stage, a sense perception, so eyes, ears, smell, touch, goes, and also a element, so like earth, air, water, they go in these 8 stages. So there's a visualization that takes you through, and I was doing this over and over and over and over. And when I was visualizing these pieces, I was visualizing textures. It was a lot of textures, and there really was, you know, I really wanted you to be able to look at these and not be like, oh, I saw that fabric at Mood, or you know what I mean? It had to be completely alien in order to be like, in order to translate the point. So a lot of the textures, I was like, okay, I'm just Googling, you know, how do I get this type of leather that kind of looks like skin and it looks wet and slick? And it was like kombucha leather was the closest thing. So I was growing that. And then there was all this stuff I made from seaweed, developing all these textiles from seaweed and growing crystals on fabrics. And I had never done any of that stuff before, but it was, my studio became my lab, sort of.
Were you watching YouTube videos on how to do it?
Yeah. And also people are really helpful with, there are people that do a lot of this stuff, and I just reached out to everyone I could think of and just asked questions, and people were like pretty nice about helping, you know, and like helping me with recipes and I don't know, stuff like that. So it was a lot of YouTube, and it was, I still had to figure a lot out for myself. But the this was the first stage in it, which is the earth element starts to go and sight starts to go. So this is all felted. This was the first time I did any felting, and which is like laying down roving on linen in this case, and like soaping in water and rolling and rolling. And then the top is made of like 300 or 400 strips of linen that are woven into this pattern. So that's the earth element. And what happens in this dissolution is your body gets heavier, sinks into the earth, and your hands go behind your back and your sight starts to go. And also with when I was doing the meditation, I was doing this alone in my room, but my hands always wanted to go into certain positions. And in this case, behind my back, because you're kind of sinking into the earth. And it became kind of butoh about it. So I was like slowly moving and kind of contour. And it wasn't like showing off for anyone, you know, I was like alone, which I don't know. Usually when I sit, I'm completely still, but in this case, it kind of made me want to move into the same hand positions, which is why every one of the 8 dissolutions, I made my own mudras, which are those. So I printed all of those on fabric and then made them into dresses, and they hang when I exhibit it. Because when I exhibit these, I put them on mannequins with heads, and the dresses hang behind sort of as a shadow. And then in the video, we had this butoh dancer, Yoko. This was dissolution 1. She danced the 8. I explained to her the whole process, and she teaches yoga nidra, and she's also a butoh dancer. So and then she modeled for the shoot. But this was dissolution 1. Dissolution 2 had to do with the water element shutting down and sound. So this was dissolution 2. And this is a fabric that I bought, and it's made from a bark tree. It's Barktex. This is the company that does it. And then I embedded these fossils into it. And what happens in this dissolution is positive and negative emotions become neutral. So that's why I felted the sleeves. And then he's wearing drum headphones. This is the model Malik. And then down the middle is hammered aluminum that's wrapped in this wax thread that makes up the color of all of the fluids of the body, and you add them together. So it makes this sound when you run your hands down. And then each of the mudra, the dissolutions has a sound associated with it. So, and I play the handpan, which is like a steel drum. So because I was doing that, I was making all these drums. So like number 1, I have it here, and I display it when I had the show. This is when you watch the video, all the sounds are, that's how it starts. They're all me playing the instruments. that either come from stuff that I've made or my
So
mouth.
you're kind of in a trance when you're doing this.
Yeah. And that was the whole kind of point of the sound, was to make this intensity that builds up, because that's what happens in the process. It's like gets more and more intense as it goes along. And then number two, where's sound of water. And that's why the mudra for number two was the shakers in the hand. And she has her arms painted white and they're behind her back, but the dresses look like that.
Mhm.
And then number three was this one, and this is the fire element and smell. So this is made up of piping that's like couch piping that's like wrapped in black roving and then wrapped in thread, lots of thread, and then painted with plasti dip. And then this is a drum in the center. And then I sew them onto these structures. And that's the mudra for this, is that one.
And the color red is very
Oh yeah, you saw that in the
present in everything. It's very, yeah.
so there's like under in between these, it's red. It's all red. I don't know if you could see it, but you could see it in the video. And then the fourth dissolution is air and taste.
Mhm.
So this is all felted. And then the mudra for this is the hands at the side. And then these are, you know, the lungs as the air element goes. So the sound for this one in the video, it goes like this. It goes, and that's the heat leaving the body. And then this one is the air. So the sound for this one is, and then, you know, when these are layered on top of each other, the sounds kind of do their own, they get into this kind of their own thing. This is number five, which is after the five senses and the four elements go, it starts to get more esoteric, I guess. So in this dissolution, you start to get associated with vision. So this is the vision of the radiant white sky, is what they call it. So it's just basically your vision goes completely white, and then the white drop from the father, which is at the forehead, slowly comes to the heart center. So that's why I work with a brilliant makeup artist, Andrew D'Angelo, who did the makeup and the face pieces for that, and he painted the white. But this is the same, where this is a triangle drum in the middle, and it's piping that's wrapped in roving and then wrapped in thread and then sewn onto the body.
It's like when you die or when you have almost die, you see that tunnel of white light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
exactly. And after the fourth dissolution, which is air, if you were in a hospital, you would be pronounced dead. And then the mind goes on to do all of these, you know, it keeps going. And so that's probably where that comes from, is seeing that tunnel after you're dead. And then what happens after that is the vision of the red sky. And this is that dissolution number 6. And so this is the one I started growing the kombucha leather. It took me about a year, because this is like 12 pieces and each piece took about a month. And then the body is made up of reed, which is like that stuff that I all dyed all red, wove into all this, and then put a layer of chiffon and then painted it with silicone. So the dress is all silicone. And then this is all the kombucha leather that I grew. And then these drums, what happens in this dissolution is the white drop from the father and the red drop from the mother, which is at below your navel, come to the middle and meet in the middle. So it's half red and half white. Then what happens is the vision of the black sky, which is this one. And this is all woven and I worked with a weaving company called Weaving Hand, who wove this for me, and then I grew the crystals on the sleeves, and then these are all crystals that were grown in this too, and the sound for this, which he's wearing on his head, is the bell. So that's in this dissolution. You hear the bell ringing, and that's my favorite part in the video is Yoko, the butoh dancer, is just, and then all of a sudden you hear the bell. I love that part. And then this is the last one, which is number 8. And what happens in this one is the mind explodes. Well, wrong adjective. The mind, it has to do with emptiness. So it's this vast vacuum of empty space. And it's so hard for me to relate to that, but the only way I could was, there's this photograph I was like really obsessed with when it came out, of an astronaut, and it's like this tiny astronaut in the vastness of space. It's such a beautiful photograph, and that was the only way I can relate to getting at what emptiness is. And so with this one, this is all a textile I made from seaweed, which is sodium alginate, is a cooking seaweed, and glycerin and water, and it's poured over sheep's wool and then sprayed with calcium chloride to harden it. So this is all that, and then the arms are here, and then the hands come out here, and then this is quartz, but all of this is bismuth, and this is all felted. So bismuth is like this amazing element that comes in a block, and you can melt it down and dip other metals into it, and it crystallizes in these like beautiful crystal colors, these really kind of translucent but like very, very bright colors. It's amazing. So I melted it and made all these like crystal, I dipped the metal into it and filled it with the crystals. So,
and where are these pieces now?
they're
a museum or something?
It started, I made this it was an exhibit that was in the Morris Museum, which is a museum in New Jersey. And they were all behind glass with a video. And then it was there for 6 months with the dresses. And that was like the full exhibit. And then it went to a gallery in Times Square in New York. And they were displayed there with the video. And then the video was on one of the big screens in Times Square for 4 weeks, which was
4 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
So what was the reaction of the public to that? 4 weeks. I mean, wow.
I know.
That's like major.
It was so cool. It was amazing.
How did that all come to be? It was through the museum, or how did that happen?
Well, no. I did a residency before I had the museum show in Governor's Island, which is actually where I met the butoh dancer Yoko. And the curator came to open studios of the Times Square show. And so she wanted to show them, and she was going to show it like later, and then we scheduled it. So they went from the museum straight to Times Square.
That's mega.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then after that, I have a couple of pieces now in a group show. There's this one, and then there's 2 more that are at the Here Art Center now with, it's a 2-person show with Andrew, who did the makeup, D'Angelo, and he's showing drawings and some wall reliefs in the show. So and then the video I wanted to make the video, number one, to get the project around, but really I wanted to show that real people can wear these things as well, and to get the music in there. And so, yeah, we used real models for that. And then the video kind of did its own thing, and it went around. And I made a video for Shadow Work, the first project. But I think with this one, I wanted to use more people and make it a kind of a more cinematic experience.
Which it was, for sure. I mean, It was really funny because last night I went to they were opening, the brand Aesop.
Yeah.
They were just opening a new shop. So they invited some people to walk with them from one shop on Vieille de Temple to Franc Bourgeois. And two of the people there happened to have been at Maastricht,
Oh,
like a
cool.
fashion clash. It's like out of, it was unexpected. And we were talking about your film, and one guy was the brother of the two people that are leaving Fashion Clash that were there for 20 years or 14 years, I can't remember. And he was saying, yeah, we were really happy with the winning film because that was by far, the
Oh, cool.
strongest film. Like he was going, they should have showed that last because you can't, I mean, after you see that, you don't really want to watch the rest of them. Because obviously they're totally different. I mean, because your film hasn't such an impact. And then we were talking about the whole topic of death as like how people are so afraid to talk about it, to look into it, to go through that experience because, as you get older, everything is slowly, from the age of 25, I think, you start losing a certain percentage of everything.
Yeah.
Like your skin loses something like, I forget the percentage a year of elasticity to your skin. And as you get older, you see things like, not as strong as they were before.
Yeah. And
The
you become
closer,
rigid in your I mean, I've definitely noticed becoming more rigid in my views, and I don't know, it's and I think one of the things I've learned from, like, at least from retreats and like actually sitting, is that it's kind of it becomes harder, but it's really never too late. Like neuroplasticity, which is like the ability to change your thoughts, it's a real thing, and you always, it's a constant struggle to like really dissect like what's happening in my mind now, what's happening in my mind now, it's every second, and be like, this these set of thoughts lead me to becoming more miserable, and I'm going to test this, and I have this hypothesis and I tested it and it's true, become scientific about it, and then be like, I have to stop these thoughts. And how are you going to do it? It's kind of up to you. My way that I find is to really go to war with it and be like, no, and this like militant discipline, still being kind, but way of trying to change